Hey everyone, welcome to Hardcover Hooligans. My name is Danylo. Mac, I have a very, very, very important question to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Exactly how excited are you to be done with these books?
Oh man, I feel like I'm the hero of ages. I just don't even know. I'm so fed up with everything.
Well, so for this episode, we read the prologue, part 1, 2, and 3 of The Hero of Ages, the third book in the first Mistborn trilogy.
That's over 400 pages, at least in my copy.
Yeah, my copy had like 350 or something like that.
Too many. Either way, too many pages.
More than half, which is a lot of pages considering what happens.
Yeah, really.
So without getting into too many details, what was your experience like reading this book, especially coming off of the last one, since it's sort of, for both of us, the last book, The Well of Ascension, killed our love of reading for a while. It's felt like a reading hangover, and like like a Pavlovian response. You just don't want to go back.
For the listener, it's been a long time since we've recorded an episode, and a big part of that is due to just it was a soul-shattering experience. Not because it's like particularly awful, but it was just like it's just a. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Yeah, it's draining. It's so frustrating, is what I think it is, and it's so we haven't wanted to dive back in, but there was this part in the back of my mind that I thought there's been some time approaching it, maybe from a fresher perspective, and for the first 2 pages, I was right. And then as soon as Elend Venture is introduced to the story in his new, in all of his glory, I was just the frowny face emoji from then on. For the rest of the section, I never enjoyed any of it. I don't enjoy any of it. So
I had a very similar experience where I'm like, okay, the third one, here we go, home stretch. You know, you get into the mindset of like, all right, we're going in. And then the more I just read Ellen's name, I was like, ugh. And then like that chapter ended, and then it was like Vin talking to Sazed, and I'm like, this is gonna be no good. It's more of the same.
It's all no good.
How did you feel like it compared to the last ones? Like frustrating in the same way? Was it maybe
it's definitely
more engaging in the same way, or what?
It's so in the second book, I do like the first half of the second book. I remember that's what I said, at least, and I think that remains true. But maybe with going back to it, I'd also hate it. But I remember liking the beginning of the second book because it was what I wanted. It was like, oh, this kingdom that they've created is falling apart, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And also the first half of that book that we read for the first episode, I believe, has the Elend Venture and Straff Venture tent conversation, which I did like. But it also has Zane, which was terrible.
And I remember us saying it sort of felt like a real book.
Yep.
The beginning of this book does not feel like a real book.
No, and part of that is due to there's a time jump. There's a year of time has passed since the previous book, and it just feels like like none of these people are the people I remember. Like, it's just, at least for me, like, Elend is a completely different character. It's insane.
They're like completely different, but like they haven't changed. It's very weird.
Vin is somehow A-okay with being the knife of the Emperor after 2 books of her really not being okay with it, and suddenly it's fine.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's fine. It just that never comes up for her again. She's like, that's just it. That's what it is.
Because she's not the main character of this book. She's in it. but it's not. It's not. The other two books are about Vin. This one is about Ellen, or at least that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I remember, infamously, the first book I said I liked Ellen is because we get no POV, and now I hate Ellen Venture just as much as I hate everybody else.
So boring. Like, any ounce of personality, like even when his personality was cringe, nerd,
yeah,
at least he felt kind of like a human being.
And he was charismatic, kind of, a little, at least a little, like an ounce.
No. Now it's he's a piece of cardboard.
Yeah. He's just like all of these people are, because there's too much, it feels like there should have been another book. And I can't believe I'm saying that. But too much is happening. It's the opposite problem, I feel. But at the same time, nothing is happening. So there's so much shit set up.
I think too much is happening in that Brandon Sanderson is trying to fit in so much ancillary stuff that he sort of forgets to do what books are supposed to do, which is, one, have stuff happen, and two, have characters that you can, identify with on some level, or, you talk about likability, which I think is sort of an overblown thing, but you have to you have to want to read about them. That's the baseline for an engaging character. And despite the fact that now I counted, we've done 1,400 pages of Mistborn, the fact that we don't care about these characters, I think says a lot after 1,400 pages of them ostensibly doing things.
The shift up top it's just it's bizarre. There's some incredibly weird character directions that these characters take, particularly with Sazed, which I was we'll get into, but I read the foreword, and he talks about Sazed was the most challenging to write, and it's all pointless, and makes no sense, because he's upset over the death of a character we knew for 200 pages, and he can't stop thinking about it, and they hung out for 3 months.
Okay, well, we're gonna get into Sazed.
I have a lot to say about Sazed.
In a big way. Also a lot to say. So we'll just say that is our spoiler-free section of the podcast.
Yeah, if you're here for a review, don't read it. That's my review. You're not missing anything. I would just Google what happens at the end.
Yeah. Yep. If you liked the other two, you'll probably like this one. But if you didn't, it does not get better.
But is that even true? This is darker than
I don't know.
Or is it? I don't know. Zane's not in it. It's not. If you like Vin and these characters, they're not. The book is not about them.
It's not them anymore.
No, it's not them anymore.
People running around talking about the things that Brandon Sanderson thinks is interesting about his little world that he made.
Yeah, there's a lot of this is the as we've been talking about these books, we've said a lot that Brandon Sanderson is not a talented enough writer to do a morally gray story, and that's the entire venture empire. It is such a swing and a miss of making these characters morally gray, because I guess by definition they are, and they make questionable decisions, but I just don't care, and it's just boring. And also I was thinking about this today, where it does feel like such a swing and a miss in terms of trying something, but I also can't say that he took any risks. I would have appreciated if it felt like he took some risks and missed, but it seems like the risk he took was writing a book with themes, and a coherent theme is not here. We're not done. I mean, granted, we're not done with the book. I've read it before, and I still think this. So okay, well, that doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence.
It'll be interesting when we're done to look at this book and the whole series as a whole based on how it ends from what he's trying to say sort of perspective.
It just feels like a pointless, all the best art you can get something more out of it than just the story, and I'm gleaning nothing. It's making me a worse person, I think. It's making me dislike books in general, which is not, I don't think that's what you want when you're the most famous fantasy author of all, arguably maybe of all time. And
I read this book before, and I've gotten nothing new, even though I'd forgotten most of what happened. So, anyway.
Yeah, whatever. We'll talk about it. I just don't care.
Each of these books is bad in a different way, which is crazy.
It's remarkable, yeah. Well, it's almost like our complaints about the previous book are addressed in the next one and done poorly. I just can't believe the artistry it takes to recognize a fault in one of your novels and be like, oh, yes, in the next one, I will do this poorly. I will try to expand upon this and do it in a bad way. Like the morally gray stuff in the previous book, that's all this is, and it's bad. And the lack of character stuff in the first book, that's all the second book is, and it's bad. Like, it's just...
yeah, it
keeps
crazy.
Going.
Well, with that, let's start by diving into the details of what happens in this book. So,
yeah,
we start off with Marsh, who was...
Well, hang on, Danylo. We start off with the pre-chapter sentence, which is an admission from Sazed. It's Sazed.
Yeah. Okay.
And it says, unfortunately, I am the, which is very fun, unintentionally a hilarious way to start your book. I am unfortunately the hero of ages, which I respect a lot.
Let's pivot. We'll talk about the epigraphs first, because every chapter has, I think, the longest epigraphs we've had in each of these books. And the sort of the conceit is the epigraphs all come from an in-world written document written by one of the characters.
And I know it says it because the audiobook guy does the says it voice when he reads it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's actually that's so funny. Because, like, I didn't get that. Like, you're supposed to assume it's Vin. But the fact that he does the says it voice is, like, immediate spoiler. That's insane.
But I just don't care. Like, I wasn't upset. Because I knew it can't be Vin because she's barely in the book. And also, like, doesn't it have to be a Terraceman? Isn't that the rule?
I guess that's what the prophecy says, but
the prophecy is also a lie. But maybe it's not.
Prophecies are also wrong, but they're also right. Whatever.
It's pretty convenient.
But all these epigraphs are basically lore dumps about the world that don't fit into the main story naturally, or the characters would have no way of knowing in the course of the story.
And they're also all science fiction related.
But assuming Brandon Sanderson made all these up and was like, well, if I tell the story, all this cool stuff I thought is going to go to waste.
Yep.
So I got to tell him somehow.
Yep.
And so he just tells him. So how was that reading for you? Because, like, this is sort of all this lore stuff has sort of been, I sort of know it in the back of my head based on when I read it the first time. So sort of taking it for granted through our whole read, because it's stuff about, like, how the world works, and we could get into the details, but who cares?
I don't care. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll mention them when they come up in the story, because sometimes they do, like about the food and the plants not growing. But in a vacuum, I think it's all very cool. Actually, like. I think it is really cool that it's a very neat idea that Rashik accidentally moved the planet far away from the sun and then couldn't get, like, the calculations right to bring it exactly where it needed to be back, so he just fixed it poorly. I will say a huge weird thing is that they keep humanizing and making the Lord Ruler seem like a good guy who is trying his best. Like, that's a bizarre... it's just insane. I don't understand that choice, they keep doing it. It also
seems like a big... I'm going to say two things. One thing, I think part of the theme of the book, or these books, is it's very clear that it's like, isn't everyone just kind of good and bad at the same time? Can really blame anyone for doing anything. That's sort of the attitude of the book. And I just want to give some background. So Rashek was the old Lord Ruler.
Yes.
Who died, but, like, the way he got his power was he went to the Well of Ascension and then had this world-shaping power. This is what we find out in these epigraphs. He had this world-shaping power, and he was trying to kill the destroy the big bad, but he couldn't. So he could like mitigate its environmental effects by like moving the planet closer to the sun, but then everything got too hot. So then he like made volcanoes to spew ash into the atmosphere to like cool it down, but then that blocked the sun, so plants couldn't grow. So he had to like make plants that could grow in this environment. So it's very sci-fi.
And this is all assuming that he couldn't have just wished for the big bad to go away.
Or move the planet back. Like, I don't
understand why you couldn't just, like, if you're just, it's vague.
It's
I feel like he could just move it back.
So many things feel like they're trying to be so specific that when they're vague, it's kind of jarring and makes you ask questions.
Yeah. I do like the mention of a planet in a fantasy novel, like a solar system. I do like that. That's cool.
And that's the whole idea between the Brandon Sanderson connected universe Cosmere thing, is that there's all these different planets with these different forces on them that are in the same universe.
Not the same, like, solar system. They're just in the same
There's
galaxy.
Like different systems.
Oh. Well, there's no, does he ever, is there ever a novel where that is explored, or is that just like a thing?
There is.
Oh, all right.
Stormlight actually becomes that
really?
The fact that there are multiple planets in that system.
No. If in the Stormlight archive I see the word allomancy, I'm dedicating my life to destroying every copy of every Brandon Sanderson novel.
What were we talking before? We were talking about the epigraphs.
You just had asked me what do I think about the lore dump, and and I didn't actually finish this. In a vacuum, they're cool, and in the book, I guess knowing it's Sazed has been helpful and being like, I like the idea of it being like a chronicled history, but it is very clunkily just you've got to know it because I thought of it. Like that Brandon Sanderson is, like you said, he has this cool lore and he wants you to know, but there's no way for like Vin to find out that information.
Do you know what's hysterical? I have a note. I wanted to talk about how short these chapters are.
Yeah.
Some of them are just like 1 page.
Yeah. They're very, like very short.
2 pages where like someone wakes up and thinks about something and then like walks across the street, then the chapter's done.
Yeah, and that's why there's fucking 86 of them or whatever. There doesn't need to be.
I was thinking about like that's weird and it just shows how like thin the plot and the characters are. And I think he had so much lore to do that he had to do so many chapters so there'd just be more epigraphs.
That's fucking awesome. That's so funny. I bet you're probably right.
That has to be it.
The cool lore part, the coolest one in the epitaph, is that what they're called?
Epigraphs.
Right, epitaph is on a grave, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
An epigraph.
Rip Mistborn.
Yeah, I wish. The coolest thing is that we get and we knew this already, sort of, but that the admission, or the reveal that, like, Rashik did hide the well himself and reshaped, like, he just renamed these places, and hid the well so that he could get the power again to try again. I did think that was cool, but that's another thing of like humanizing this terrible, because he's not a good guy, and Ellen keeps saying I think he was probably pretty good, and I just don't understand, like, what is the message here, because there's God, it's so fucking frustrating.
It seems like so much. It's like a weird mix of things that was clearly planned from the beginning, and a lot of things that clearly just occurred to him while he was writing, that he wanted to do while he was writing this book, and like couldn't go back and fix. Like, because if you wanted to make Lord Ruler like this in the first book, like this potentially morally gray guy who like was forced to do terrible things, like you could do that with maybe some POV or something. But like,
there should have barely
in. He's the big bad of the first book, and he's barely in there.
Yeah, there needed to be a section of him, like just like one of him alone, like crying or like cursing himself or something.
And
even that wouldn't be perfect, but it's something, because all we know of him is he kills like who we are supposed to think is like the coolest guy in the world, and then everybody hates him, and I don't.
He creates a slave class and then like arbitrarily executes citizens, and like you talk
somehow
about
that's
he
supposed
had
to help.
Unimaginable power. and he was just kind of a doofus. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, that they're not. He's a bad guy. They keep saying that maybe he wasn't as bad as we were thinking. He made slavery for no reason. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to create, and like literally, like in a way that like racists justify the like chattel slavery. Like the Skull are literally physiologically different and therefore must be slaves, and the characters in the book still are like, no, the Lord Ruler's good. Actually, he might not be all that bad.
He was just doing his best.
It is borderline disgusting, and in this book there are a lot of way more references than there ever have been of spooks, racial slurs, street accent. He keeps bringing it up, and every time I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? I just don't get it.
I think it's just like what we said in the last episode, where this seems like a good idea, and like not thinking any more in depth about the implications of what this means in the real world. And I have a idea that I might bring up later that might shed some light on it.
Oh, sure.
I'll just bring it up now. There's a moment where there's so much in this book, especially, that it's clearly just like Brandon Sanderson's opinion.
Yes.
Or like his worldview idea. And like, it doesn't matter whether a character would actually think that, but he shoehorns it in there, or like stretches the meaning of words to make it so it sort of fits in the book. And they just kind of like, huh? There's a scene where Vin like meets with a like informant in a city they're trying to like take over, and he's all like, do you like stories? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, all these people like fetishize the real world when it's not really that cool of a place. Stories are just like better.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, like in world, like the world is ending. Like, I don't know, like the real world is where real things happen. And like, what? Like, I just don't, I think that's so clearly like
stories are not an important, it's not like a theme. Like storytelling is not a theme of the book, so it doesn't make any fucking sense.
This just comes up from a random like one-off character. And it's so clear that like that's what he thinks about books. Like they're just escapism. I think which makes a lot of sense in how these books are written, where like, who cares about the characters? Like, it's all about this world I've made, and I'm gonna live in it because I don't like the real world or something, Not that this one's any good, but like, I don't know. It's
like a weird, embarrassing admission. Like, you can have that thought, but don't post your L by writing a book about that's how you think.
And like that's like not the opinion of the character, because that's not a character. Like, that's just a guy.
He's
that's
an
informant, and then he just has this opinion, which is very clearly like,
it's bizarre.
It's bizarre. There's a lot of weird little bits like that. Anyway, so we talked about the epigraphs. This book also starts with Marsh, who was Kelsier's brother, and he was turned into a Steel Inquisitor. And his plot line in this first 2/3 of the book is that he basically sits around and does nothing until his last chapter. Like, there's literally a chapter where like he's sitting and the ash is gathering on him, and he's like thinking, and then the chapter's done.
Yep.
But sort of through this, we learned about the new big bad for this book, which is called Ruin. And the sort of the idea we find out about is that on this planet, there are these opposing forces called Ruin and Preservation. And the idea of that, like,
how did he ever come up with that?
Vin in the Well of Ascension released Ruin, and so now that's why the world is going to shit, because this force is just actively trying to decompose and ruin the whole world. I remember when I read this book the first time, I thought that idea for like an evil force was interesting. Not that it would be an interesting way to do it, but like the fact that it's just like decay, or like organized decay or something. I don't know if you found that particularly interesting.
No,
or unique.
I don't care, because it's like it's not it's like specifically destruction. I don't know if it's decay, because they are like, they're not just letting people die. Like, I feel like decay would be removing the ability to have children or something, but like they're going out of their way to like slaughter people and like burn down cities and stuff. And it's also a nameless like, its name is capital R Ruin. Yeah, it's a nameless, faceless bad guy that I don't understand, and our only like point of reference is that it can control a character that is boring, like that. Like, it's just nothing, and I just don't care. And I also think it's really dorky that it's just ruin and preservation. It's just like a, I don't know.
And it doesn't make for an engagement. It doesn't feel like, this is another sense to this. It feels so plotting, is that there's literally no bad guy because it's this nameless, faceless force. Yeah. And they have an arbitrary amount of time. They're like, oh, we have a year until the crops fail. Oh, we can do this siege for a few months. So there's no sense of urgency. Half of them don't believe in what they're fighting. And like, there's a way you could make that interesting where like, oh, there's this stakes to try to convince people that this exists and is happening, but like, they don't really try to do that. Like, it's just, they just are doing their own thing, and all this stuff is happening in the background
because nobody cares, because it's not it's just bizarre to me that it takes like 350 pages for more of the characters to be like, oh yeah, the mists are weird and bad, like maybe purposefully so.
And that was happening in the last book, where like the mist started killing people in the last book and started hanging around more, and everyone, the same people, are still like, well, is it happening? I don't know.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Crazy. It's just so arbitrarily inflated to make sure nothing keeps happening, so like this book length thing comes up. Like,
it's because he's thinking about the ending. You can like feel him trying to figure out the ending while he's writing it, because there doesn't need to be all this shit.
Or he has an idea for an ending but doesn't have the idea for a book that leads up to it.
Yeah, he's just trying to get
really
to the ending.
Feels like.
Yeah, that's a better point. It's just so frustrating. I hate that they're at least with the mists, they're dealing with the same exact problem, and no progress is made until seriously like 300 pages into the book.
And not even any progress is made. Like, something happens with stakes that changes how people are supposed to act. Like, the first part of the book, it's like they're talking about how they need to like do these things to save the world, but like all of their actions are like totally out of alignment with that. Yep. Like, if you were actually trying to do what they say they were trying to do, you would not do and say the things they were doing.
No, their idea is like they have to get these storage caches.
Yeah, it's like a fetch quest, basically.
It is. It's a video game.
The Lord Ruler secretly left all these little storage caches in various cities that had like things you needed to survive this apocalyptic event that they're now going through. And so Elland and company are trying to take their army to get them, but they also can't tell the people in the cities that they're there, because then they'll like waste them or something. And it's very like... but then some cities have found them already, and so it's, I don't know.
They should be trying to kill the bad guys. They shouldn't be trying to find the food. Like, the idea is to, I don't know, wait out the end of the world, because where are you going to get more food from? Nothing is growing. And like, the characters do bring that up, but it's like, they should have, it's been a year. They should be after the fucking Steel Inquisitors. Like, that should be the goal.
It's been a year and it feels like they've done nothing.
No, they've done nothing, except Elland is suddenly like a buff, cool, powerful guy.
It felt like just the gap between the first book and the second book, where it's like a year went between publication dates, or it feels like a Harry Potter book where like a school year has passed, or like the summer has passed, and like nothing really changed, but like, it's like new school year on the Mistborn planet. Yeah, everyone's back. Like, hey, how was your summer?
Yeah, that is what it feels like.
No, they've been like, I guess, doing things, but like there's never any mention of anything that's happened in between the books, like at all. Like maybe people have moved around, but new plots have appeared. Like that's all that's happened, really.
And you might think there's more to say about Elend and Vin, but until the end of the last part that we're covering for this episode, there's not, because most of it is about two characters, Spook and Sazed. That is like who the main characters of this book about, and what the most, although I think they're shitty, interesting plot details surround. So like Vin and Elend is like on paper, I feel like the main character, by definition the protagonist, because he is moving the plot forward. But the plot is shitty and nothing is happening. So for large swaths of time, there's no protagonist, which is pretty cool. I think that's an incredible feat for a book to achieve.
Well, I think we should talk about let's talk about Elend and Vin character stuff right now while we're talking about them, because then we don't have to bring them up ever again. Elend is one of, like, second to Sazed, the most annoying character in this.
Yeah, he's insufferable.
Because he's the emperor of this thing, but he's, like, constantly being like, but I'm killing people by, like, putting them to war. Am I just like the Lord Ruler? It's just, he's just so troubled by the fact that, like, he has to use power. Like, that's not a full character, because it just there's no he just keeps saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah,
and
he
two,
doesn't come
he
to
went through
conclusions.
this in the past book, where it's like, I'm an idealist, but the world requires me to be practical. And like in this book is like, I'm an idealist, I wish we could save all these people, but practically some of them are going to die based on my actions. You know, and I have to choose the thing where the fewest people die. And like, that doesn't seem like an interesting conundrum, because like, you choose the thing that the fewest people die. And then it seems so artificial that he just is all tormented by it, but also not too bad to keep him from doing it again. He just
he has to keep doing it.
Yeah, he just keeps doing it and then keeps complaining about it, and who cares?
Well, when they set this up, it initially seems like Elend is like this hard-boiled guy, and Vin is like uncomfortable by it, which I was like, this is kind of cool. It's like a reverse how they were feeling about each other in the second book. But no, Elend also is conflicted about it, and Vin doesn't care. She's like,
Vin's
whatever.
Like, it looks like he's troubled by something, and that's all he sees. They never talk about it. They never.
No. And Elend is, when Elend is by himself and he's talking to Ham about it, which Jesus Christ, but is like, I'm not sure about all of this death and murder. It's like, you're the guy whose plan to defeat the devil was to conquer the world. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's your plan. That's your fucking plan. So it's ridiculous that he's this late into this endeavor and still unsure about it.
Or like their whole plan, they're like, the only way we can save the world is by conquering these cities to so we can all share resources to get through this.
Right.
And like, but then he feels bad about having to conquer these cities. Like, I don't like, either you believe in the greater good you are like leading, or you don't. Like, I don't quite understand what his problem is. It's just so paper thin, and I think it just feels like a teenager who just found out that, like, oh man, I can't have everything go right all the time. Like, it just feels like such a adolescent view of like, man, I thought when I was in power, I could do everything right. But turns out now that I'm in power, it's a little more complicated. Like, Yeah. Like, that's and also, basically it.
He's the emperor, but he has no seat of power, because the other guy is the king. Everybody's like has their individual kingdom. So when this is over, what are you actually the emperor of? A bunch of tiny individual kingdoms that hate you? What is the plan here?
He's trying to bring them together so the whole world like shares its resources to get through it.
I know,
but also does such a bad job of trying to explain that to people.
Yeah,
where like he's like, but I'm not the Lord Ruler, and like, dude, go with the I'm saving the world angle. You just have to pledge like he goes into the city and says like, pledge your fealty to me. You still have all your same power. I'm just like in charge of all these cities, like a president. And so we can like organize. But then he's like, I don't know, man. It's just so frustrating.
Right, because that's what he says, and then he's like, and if you don't do that, we're gonna fucking kill every last one of you. And it's like, you just pick one of those and do it. Like, don't. It's so bizarre to me that Elend isn't just. He doesn't just. You're exactly right. He doesn't just say this. There's like a demon, and we're trying to stop him. And you can see, right, because everything is fucked up and there's all these earthquakes all the time. Like, that's what's happening. We went to this well. Like, look, Sazed was here. He writes all this shit down. Because guess what? You can write stuff down. They keep saying you can't. You can. You just write it in metal. You can talk to each other by writing it in metal. Oh, my fucking God.
Yeah, because the big thing in the last book is that the Ruin, the baddie before us, can change anything that's not written in metal. And they write plenty of stuff in metal. Yeah, it's just... Yeah, I don't. It's
and presumably like Yeoman has okay. So a big part of this book is Elend and Vin are struggling to get like the last city under their control, and it's being run by.
It's called Phaedrix City. Yeah, and it
gets and the leader of this city is an obligator, and like the way that Phaedrix works is how the entirety of the Lord Ruler's empire looked. So the Ska are slaves and the nobles control, and they have balls and stuff. It's the same situation as the first book. In all of the cities, or maybe in 5 of the cities, there are these like storage caches, which in the last book we saw one of them. It just so happened to also be where the Well of Ascension was. And they have a hint about the next quest, and they have a bunch of like food and supplies and metal reserves of a metal that has heretofore been a secret. Now, Yeoman, is that his name?
I think so, yeah.
Yeoman should have read, like, the Lord Ruler leaves these notes about Ruin, and like the world is fucked up now. Reading that, he should be fully aware of the situation, right? Like, he should be like, yeah, we should join forces.
Before we get too deep into that, I think there is more Yeoman stuff context to come down the road.
Oh, is he an agent of evil?
I neither confirm nor deny.
There's a really stupid part with Yeoman at the very end of this. Everybody is so ableist in this book, it's insane. Just another disgusting thing about the way this book is written. Every time the one character with a visual disability, Lord Set, is paraplegic, every single time he's described, we have to know how useless his legs are. That's what they keep saying. He keeps writing that, like his useless dangling legs. Like,
well,
oh
and
my
then, like,
fucking God.
It's like written off because he's kind of bristly. Like, he's not even a full asshole.
He's the guy who runs all the tactics for the fucking army.
And he's supposed to come off as unlikable and like too cruel. But like, I found myself reading like, just do what he says.
He's right.
Like, yeah, he's right.
They're like, you should poison the well. Lord Set suggests, because Phaedrix used to be Lord Set's city before he did the biggest bag fumble of all time and left and tried to take over Luthadel. So he says, you should just poison the well. And Ellen's like, I don't know about that. People are going to die. And it's like, okay.
He's like, then, let me talk to the guy first. And then, like, he
and
talks
we'll
to the guy.
Note. And it's like, if you drink the water, you'll get poison. And Lord Set's like, okay, like, whatever.
Let me talk to Yeoman. And then another thing is Vin and Ellen, like, crash this ball so they can talk to Yeoman, because Yeoman won't, like, actually have an audience with them. And they like get into an argument, and like Yeoman calls Elend a hypocrite because he's using force to try to take over these cities, just like the Lord Ruler. And for some reason that gets to Elend, but that's like such a dumb tale. Like, he's not like anyway, because he's trying to save the world from the evil force. Anyway,
and Vin is there.
Vin is there. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Vin doesn't have a character arc, but in one sentence, she apparently realizes that she's now fully actualized individual. Did you catch that?
No, I didn't. What?
It was like she went when she and Ellen went to the ball, and she was like in the dress. She's like,
I do like this.
She's like, I do like this. I can be both. I can be a warrior and someone. Like,
yeah, I do remember that.
First book was about like,
yep.
And I wrote in the margins like, wow, wish we could have seen that instead of just one night she realizes it, and then most of the other time is her spent doing like research. So much of this book is characters talking about like what's going on in the world and trying to come to conclusions about it.
Yeah. And
it's just so boring.
And Vin is at the end of this section, which I it is revealed, at least temporarily, because it could be a trick or an illusion, that that Vin's like terrible cartoon older brother is back, and he's
cartoon as in cartoonishly abusive to her in their childhood.
Yeah, he's not a CGI. He's not described in the book as a CGI character.
I will say one of the two actual plot points in 300 some pages includes Vin, and basically Vin tries to sneak into that last storage cache in Phaedrix, and when she gets in, like the door slams behind her. So she was like tricked, like Yeoman had some sort of plan to trap her.
Looney Tunes plan.
Yep. I was also thinking like it would have maybe made things more tense if like we saw him coming up with that plan, and so we knew Vin like was going to walk into it. We could be like, no, Vin, don't do it. We know something's going to happen.
Walking into danger.
That would have been like, it's just not like, nothing's happening and all of a sudden a plot point happens, like it. We could use some dramatic irony, but I guess not. Ugh. I'll say the other plot point that actually raises the stakes in any way involves Marsh. The only thing he does was he goes to Luthadel.
Oh yeah,
where Lord Penrod, who's like the king of Luthadel now,
who was to refresh my memory, because I didn't look it up because I didn't care at the time, but now we're talking about it. He is the king. He's the guy in charge of Luthadel at the end of the second book, who's like hiding.
Yeah. So he was like voted to be the king, and then I guess in the end, in the year that's passed, he decided he's still going to be the king, and then Ellen's going to promote it to emperor.
Right. But Penrod has shown himself to be a coward.
Yes.
Okay.
But someone needs to be king of Luthadel, and it can't be Ellen, because Ellen has to be out there doing things. So
right.
Don't worry about it.
Right, I'm not worried about it.
But Marsh, basically under control of Ruin, goes to Penrod and drives a metal spike into his heart so that doesn't kill him, but Ruin can now control him, because Ruin can control or like influence the thoughts of anyone who has metal in their body.
Specifically the hematologic version of, like, he can't control Vin when she eats metal.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Like, it has to be a hematologic spike, because the
which is the magic that the
new magic
Inquisitors
system
use. Yes, I was right. There is a new magic system.
It's called hemalurgy, which is basically like blood metal magic. You can transfer magic powers through metal spikes by like blood and killing people.
Also, I just thought of this. So, Vin knows that Ruin can change written language. Ellen writes a note to be, or like something to be delivered to Lord Penrod about like...
Oh, he writes it in metal.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Oh, so then Ruin is somehow they've killed the messengers then. I was going to say, like... Yeah. They didn't get it. And I was like, oh, fuck, of course they didn't get it, because he wrote it down. But never mind. All right.
I think
you got me this time, Brandon.
I think on a technicality. That's basically it with Vin and Ellen.
Well, yeah, but
the who have been the main characters of this entire series in the last book are the most boring characters.
But Reen is back, or at least Vin thinks that Reen is a Mistborn at the end.
Yep.
Just for me, it can't be. I just feel like if it is, then whatever. But I think it'd be a lot more interesting if it's like some kind of trick by this evil guy. But I guess we'll find out. But I also don't care. So there's that.
The next plot thread is Spook.
Yeah, buddy.
So Spook, aka Lestborns, was one of the crew members' nephews, and he's always sort of felt useless because he didn't have any magic powers. No, but he has one magic power, which is he's a tin eye, which means he burns tin, and it can be like his senses get super heightened.
Yep.
And his whole thing in this book
is he becomes Batman.
He's in a city called Urto or Urtu.
Yeah, Urto.
Urto. Let's say Urto. And his assignment is to gather information for Ellen,
which is delightfully vague.
I wrote. When I went through the plot lines, I did what the main thrust of each plot is, and some of them are like walking to a city and gathering information, sitting around, gathering information, sitting in a cell, sitting around, gathering information.
What an exciting book
like
it sounds like.
Each plot thread, like the main thing that happens is either sitting around, gathering information, or walking to a city.
There's a ton of sitting around and gathering information in this book. It keeps happening.
Anyway, so Spook's whole plan is to gather information in this city, and what's special about this city is it's run entirely by Ska, and it's led by a man named Quellion, who calls himself the Citizen, and the whole idea is he's in charge, and he's super zealous about killing nobles, so he starts having public executions of anyone who's found to have noble blood.
Which is another weird, like, Sandersonian, like, political belief that is coming through. That's like, if the people are in charge of themselves, they're gonna turn into Nazis. Because that, like, this city is... there's literally, like a genealogy program where they, like, track down the lineage of people to make sure they don't have noble parents, and it's like, why the only, like, truly free city we see, why does it have to be they have pogroms every night?
Why is the only city where, like, the former slave class is involved is, like, bad?
Yeah, is like uber
that's
violent.
Like the defense of, like, the defense of slavery is like, see, the Haitian slave revolt didn't work,
right,
and now that country's bad, therefore slavery is good. Like, you know, it's I don't know what he's trying to say by...
It's bizarre.
Like, anyone wielding power is bad? Like, because that's also what Ellen's whole plot arc is, where he's like, power means you get to kill people. Like, it's desperately trying to say something about power, but, like, it just doesn't say anything, because it's like, isn't it crazy how power works sometimes? That's really sort of what it's about.
And he's named the leader the Citizen. Like this is not in the story, but thinking of it, like, the idea of the citizen controlling itself is bad. That's the argument, which is
like a
insane.
Democracy.
Yes, it's
of,
fucking
like, a majority
bizarre.
of people ruling themselves is bad, which is crazy, and why every book it's like, we need the Lord Ruler. Oh, he's gone.
Yeah, you need
Ellen needs to be a king. Oh, that didn't work out. Ellen needs to be emperor. Like, there has to be Daddy has to be in charge. Like, that's sort of, which potentially maybe betrays a religious worldview where, you know, a world where there isn't a god or some divine being would just totally devolve into chaos and murder. Like, that's a kind of religious belief, sort of.
Yeah. But also, you know, speaking of that, Orto, the people worship the Church of the Survivor. Mm-hmm. So they are, like, fueled by... They're like radical extremists, like
radical, Christians, basically.
It's just
Church of the Survivor is the church like that rose from, like, Kelsier, the Christ figure who died sacrificing himself to save the populace with scars on his arms. That's his religion. is now has been gaining steam.
Who returned to life as a ghost after 3 days. Like, that's literally what happens in the story. Except I think it's the same night, but whatever. It's he comes to life.
He reappears to his followers to... Yep. And there's the great quote where... I don't know who said it. This is just like such an obvious, like, isn't religion kind of kooky?
Yeah.
Some character says, I don't know if it's like says it or something. No, it was Vin. It's Vin. Vin is like, apparently people from the Church of the Survivor, because Kelsier was killed by like 2 spears to the chest, basically. Then the symbol of the religion becomes 2 spears. And Vin is like, she thought it was kind of crazy that the image of his religion was the tools that killed him. Like, that's such an obvious, like, allusion to the fact that the cross is the symbol of Christianity because that's the tool that killed Jesus Christ.
And it's like everybody
what are you trying to say?
And everybody has had that thought. It's not a unique thought to like bring up. Like, it would be funny if it was like
world.
Yeah, I don't know, it would be funny. It's not like played for laughs. Like, it would be funny and like metatextual if it was, but no, it's trying to be like, well, isn't that interesting? And no, it's not, because when you're like 6 and you see it, you're like, hey, but wouldn't that be violent and bad? Like, it's just like even if you grew up like totally atheist, you have questioned that in your life. And Brandon Sanderson approaches it if it's some like, oh, how interesting is this? And it's like, I'm not 6 years old.
When you're 32 in an insular Christian religion in Utah, like maybe thinking about these things when you're, in your early 30s is like, ooh, maybe I'm onto something here.
I'm a bad boy.
But like, I don't know. It's just it tries so hard to be so different from our world, but then like through the biases of the author, his ideas and thoughts about the world come through in such glaring and jarring ways.
So Spook is Batman.
And he goes, so the citizen has a sister who like feels bad about the killing, and Spook's in love with her.
Yeah, after she saw her twice.
And he like puts a bandana around his eyes because the sun's too bright, because he's always burning tin.
But he's also wearing glasses, so he looks like a dork. Like, I don't understand that part.
He's like, wearing glasses. Seems like a classic Sanderson thing where like, he's going to wear bandana all the time. Oh, but then it's sort of like crunching his eyes shut. So he put glasses, so there's a little bit of a space between his eyes and the bandana, so he can see clearly. But it's still like...
Is that what it is?
That's what it is. There's like a whole paragraph where he talks about why he's wearing glasses under his bandana.
Because I thought this whole time it was bandana and then glasses on the outside. He looked like a maniac.
No, it's glasses, bandana.
Okay, so from the outside, he looks like a cool, like, blind samurai guy.
Yeah, basically.
That's the idea. So,
yeah, his senses are so now heightened that he can, like, feel sword swings and
because he burned tin straight for a year, which gave him the ability to have tin without ever using it.
Yeah, it's like he pushed his body so hard that like it's sort of like that permanently now.
Which begs the instant question, why don't all Mistborn burn all their metals for a year and just sort of like sit there, and then suddenly they'd be like the most powerful person on the planet?
That's a good question. Or why, I think it says on a technicality, like, this is hard on your body and like it could kill you. But like that also,
no.
If it's go.
They say that pewter is the most dangerous one to burn because you won't feel like pain enough that will eventually kill you. But it is not ever said that you can't just sit there and burn them all and become very powerful.
Well, and also if this was true for 1,000 years, then someone probably would have tried it.
Yep.
Well,
because the story tells, like, he knows. Like, the story tells us there's, like, writings about not doing that. Or, like, whatever. So people should know that just do that. Just do that, and you'll be awesome.
Whatever. It's like a cool idea, and then you think about the implications, and the world is created, and it all falls apart.
Just to go back to Vin and Ellen, the last thing, but it's important, and we didn't talk about it, is that since Ellen ate some Benadryl from the Well of Ascension, he has like OG Mistborn powers. So he's like incredibly powerful, which of course he is, because we can't have yes, the woman much more powerful than the female protagonist, because he has to be, because that's man is writing the story. So
the first 2 books were about a female protagonist who was super powerful, but then for the last one, the guy's got to be in charge.
Yep, let the men take over, sweetie. It's time to Mistborn it up.
And you don't do anything for an entire book. That's the whole series has been about you until now, but
you get shelved. Anyway, back to
Spook is Batman. A lot of stuff happens. It doesn't matter.
Right. So,
but he is like trapped. He gets like captured by the citizen, and the way the citizen executes people he suspects that have noble blood is he puts them in an old nobleman's mansion, douses it with oil, and then burns it.
Which you'd think would run out eventually.
But no, they have as many as they need. But during one of these, Spook is in there, and they like board up the windows so like no one can get out. But a voice starts talking to him, and it's revealed that voice is the voice of Kelsier. And Kelsier leads him to a vial of pewter, but Spook can't burn pewter, or can he? All of a sudden now he can. Like, Kelsier gave him the power to burn pewter, and then Spook gets out of the fire, and people start calling him the survivor of the flames,
which is lame. Sorry. But yeah, so
and then at one point says that like someone's talking about like survivor of the flames, and says it's like, I wonder who that is, even though Says it has been spending time with Spook for like weeks. And Says it's like, can I meet this survivor of the flames? It's like,
it's super stupid. Yeah, so Spook gets he can burn 2 metals, which is like unheard of. It's just one or all of them.
Yeah.
And it's funny that he treats it like a big deal, and it's like it's still not all of them. Like, suddenly it's in the story he's like as powerful as the Mistborn, even though it's just 2 of them. Like, and pewter doesn't make you like physically stronger. Like, if you have a gun and you shoot somebody in the head who's burning pewter, they still die. It's just that like they can like muscle through pain more.
Yeah.
Which it's of all of the other ones it does
make them physically stronger, because like they punch harder. But
but not like it doesn't make tougher, your heart stronger.
Right. It doesn't make it like your skin doesn't turn to a shell or something.
Right. Yeah. That's what I meant. It's just like I just don't see a point to any of this. Like, I don't care that Spook has pewter now. Okay, how is he going to kill the oh my god, I just don't care about any of it. Spook is so fucking stupid, and everybody in Orto is dumb. And
it's this whole part of this, but it's like tiny distinctions, but like the whole doesn't matter. So why would you care about the tiny distinction details? It's just so much like it's just like an endless pile of dumb little things that like are masquerading in a trench coat like something interesting.
Yep.
And then if you're not looking too close, you're like, whoa, that's kind of impressive. But like as soon as you like look at it, like you open the trench coat, you're like, wait a minute, this is just a bunch of dumb stuff glued together, and I don't care about any of these things individually at all. And none of them make any sense individually.
Spook, this is the last thing about Spook. Spook makes the discovery that it's specifically noblemen's mansions, not to give the big middle finger to the nobles, but so that they can sneak out any allomancers from the burnings.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, so an informant tells Spook to count the skulls, which is hilarious, because that means that the informant had to have known that Spook was going to get thrown into a big fire eventually and somehow make it out. So he does, and he counts the skulls, and it's always 10. There's always 10 nobles who are thrown in, and there's 9 skulls, which just to me, I'm like, maybe he just didn't find the other skull, but somehow Spook puts it together that, like, the citizen has a bunch of allomancers,
aka nobles, because only
Right,
nobles are allomancers.
right.
So he is a big hypocrite.
yeah, and that's bad, and I'm supposed to care, but I don't. So that's the big discovery.
This
Spook
world
makes.
cares so much about whether people are hypocrites. Or Brandon
Yeah,
Sanderson really cares. Like, Elend is the worst thing you can call him is a hypocrite. Like,
I don't
the
understand.
world's ending. Like, the citizen, he thinks he's about justice for the Ska, but really, he's just a hypocrite. And we'll get to Sazed, but Sazed's like,
He also
I
a
used to
hypocrite.
believe in religions, but turns out all the people who believe in religions are all hypocrites when you look deep down at it, and that's bad. And it's just such a, when you're 14 or 13 and you realize that like adults aren't perfect.
Yeah, they can
And
like
you're
lie.
they're people that lie. Like, did you find out that like like I think this is like the religious daddy complex. Like,
Yeah.
you realize that maybe daddy isn't perfect, and so that throws your whole world into disarray. And that's what this whole book is about.
It's the entire thing. Everybody's a hypocrite. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I feel like something else happens to Spook, but I don't remember.
Nothing that matters.
He's Batman in the sense that he starts saving these nobles.
And Kelsier, the voice of Kelsier, keeps talking to him and tells him to like, do stuff and kill people or not kill people or something.
And it is left sort of vague, but not really, is if he's actually talking to Kelsier or not.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about Spook?
I don't think so. Other than we learned that his name, Lestibornis, means some bullshit I don't care about. It means like
bullshit in his like original like street slang or whatever.
Yeah, made up language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is crazy because it's such a clearly after the fact. Like, it's because he was abandoned as a kid. I wrote this down because it's really like, what? Like, this did not need to be another chapter. So, like, his whole street accent is like a wuzzing of the ising of, like, it's a lot of like ing verb. Like, everything's an ing verb. But, like, his original name is Lestiborns. And clearly that was just an interesting name that he came up with at the beginning. But... or it was planned. Either way, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
The story is like, because he was abandoned as a kid, he was an orphan. His name was Lefting I'm Born.
Which is it's not like, which doesn't make any sense because his like accent is not, he replaces the F with an S.
Right. Like then it got like, got like condensed into something. And so like,
it's just nothing.
It's one of those weird. It's just a nothing detail that's trying to be interesting,
but it's not.
Because we need to create another chapter out of thin airs because there's more epigraphs more world lore to dump.
And Spook is not allowed as a human being to be accepted into society unless he learns to talk like the white characters,
or unless he like because he has like low self-esteem, like he feels bad about the fact that like he doesn't have any special powers, and so like the more special powers he has, the better he feels about himself, that he can like do things, which like I guess that's a good character journey, but
it's much more interesting for him to come to terms with who he is as a person rather than like, no, if you're really depressed, you'll magically become cooler. Like that's how it works.
Yeah, rather like it's more interesting to never give him powers or like give it to him and take him away and he has to deal with it. Anyway, we could rewrite these books all day.
The Spook stuff just really made me like seriously angry with like his name being Spook and them battering into the reader's head that like he sure talks funny, doesn't he?
Well, it's just insane. I laughed out loud. There was a line where he's like, because this whole street slang idea that's like in the first book, in this whole scene, and then not in the second book, and that's his only character thing, and it's so weird and cringe. And then in this book, it's like this is what led him to totally drop his street slang. And I'm like, it's just so obvious that like he's like, I don't like this idea, so I'm just gonna say that I'm not gonna do any more. The character who did it is not gonna do it anymore. Ugh.
It's fucking stupid and it's embarrassing. And if you were like, oh no, but that's not. I'm sure that's not what he meant to do. It doesn't matter. It's what's in the book, and it's terrible and bad.
So that's Spook. we have one more small plot thread before we get to Sazed, and that is the Kandra plot thread.
Oh, Jesus Christ, I forgot.
I did too, almost. With Tensoon. So this was, the Kandra are these goo creatures made of clear goo. And they take the bones of other living creatures, but they're like conscious. And they take the bones of other living creatures and can like make bodies around them. So they like can be used as like assassins, and people disguise them. And they have a whole society that's very rigid. There's the first generation, they're called the Firsts. Those were the first Kandra ever made by the Lord Ruler. Then there's the Seconds, which were the second generation, and then like the Thirds, and it just keeps going down. And each layer is taught. Each layer of Kandra are taught by the previous ones, and so they have a very rigid social structure. And their big secret is that Allomancers can control them, and so they've tried to keep that secret for all time.
And this is not important. We also learned stuff about the Kolos, but who cares?
Yeah.
They're like the reason the Kolos look so weird and fucked up is because they're really like 5 people hematologically fused together to make one big funny looking creep.
Well, and this is such a dumb reveal. So the Kolos are like the big blue warrior guys, and like basically like they're an army of barbarians that any strong Allomancer can control completely. And like a whole weird subplot for some reason is like, where do the Kolos come from? And that's another thread in these 300 pages.
But I just bring that up because I was confused. Did they ever say why, or will they ever say, like, why they can be controlled by Allomancers? Because
the Lord Ruler created them that way. Like, they were supposed to be his personal army that he could control.
To use against Ruin.
Or to use against, just to use, like, to subjugate his populace, I guess, or to use against Ruin or something.
But why would he need to subjugate? Why subjugate anybody in the first place?
That's a great question, Mac.
I just don't fucking get it. So it's just like a bizarre, weird point that they can be controlled, and that's bad news.
Yeah, and that they come from other people, and they use metal spikes to make them magic metal spikes and blood magic.
And Tensoon the Kandra is the Kandra that killed Orsur, and was on Zane's side the whole time from the previous book.
Yep.
And he went to the cops and turned himself in, and they threw him in forever jail until he says sorry or whatever.
He gets to be goo under a grate, and they like feed him soup. But then there's his whole plot thread is literally him sitting in jail, getting taken out for a trial, where he goes like, "You're all a bunch of hypocrites. The world's going on." It happens twice. The world is going on outside of here. And they're like, throw him back in jail. And the second time it happens, they give him his dog body, because he had a dog body in the last book, as like fuck you. But then he just uses it to escape. And then he escapes.
Because they assume like he's killed. The reason that he's in ultra jail is because he killed a Kandra.
Yeah, and he revealed, and he also then he just admitted he revealed the secret to Vin that like Allomancers can control them.
But they assume like, he's not going to hurt any of us again, even though all of our goo bones are made of glass, like literally made of glass and very weak. He's not going to do that again, right? And he does.
Yeah,
and he escapes, and it's fine.
All the Kandra have like, when they're not like taking the form of a human, they have these decorative bones that it's like,
is kind of cool.
A cultural thing. Like it's made of glass or wood or, and this is another thing. Like Tensoon's like, why do we dress like humans if we hate them so much? Are we just kind of hypocrites?
It's so stupid. And Tensoon, his big thing, his like defense, because he's his own lawyer, and he's not like an appointed attorney in jail. So his defense is that he actually didn't do anything wrong, because he was always serving the owner of the first contract, which has to be Vin, because Vin killed the original owner,
which was the Lord Ruler. Yeah,
right. And so, and all of the Kandra are like, no, you're going back to Ultra Jail, which is very funny.
This all has the tinge of like a religious interpretation argument to authority. And I looked this up. the Mormon Church is run by like consecutive groups of like councils. There's like the 9 at the top, then there's like an assembly of 30 or something like that. So I really think like this is another sort of religious attempt to say something about institutional structure.
And this is another, like, Brandon Sanderson loves, like, bootlicking. He can't stop. Because he's like, oh, Tensoon can't be a person unless he goes and is controlled by a different person, Vin. And so Tensoon is like, I'm gonna go and find Mom. Like, it's his mother, but he's like, I'm gonna go find my new mom.
I was rejected by my council of dads, so I'm gonna go find my mom.
Yeah, I can't just, like, leave and deal with these things on my own. No, I need somebody who can literally enslave me with their mind to tell me it's all good.
because I was made that way. I was made to be enslaved.
Right. And that's fine.
That's the whole thing about the Kandra. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his whole thing is like, we should all just accept that. That's his whole take. Yeah. He talks to his whole like species and like, we were meant to be enslaved by more powerful beings.
So we have to.
So we have to be.
It's not that we could break these chains and like rise up.
Well, no, but that's the original plan because they call it there's so many like capital letter words. Yeah, the contract. There's the homeland. But they have the Kandra culturally have a thing called the resolution, which is like at some point.
Did I miss that? I must have missed that.
Well, it's like in one of the first chapters where like if some conditions are met, like if everyone finds out they can be controlled, like all the Kandra are supposed to like kill themselves rather than be subjugated again like they used to be. But no, Tensoon's like, we can't do that.
Yeah. Or like change it. I just have no reason. Like none of that needs to be in this book. And like even if it becomes important, like I just don't care. Like, Tensoon is not an interesting character because for all intents and purposes, we just fucking met him. Because we thought he was Orsur the whole time because he was playing a character. Like, Tensoon is nothing to me. Kill him.
Well, the only thing interesting is now there's this whole other subculture. But, like, you know, it's not... The character's not interesting. It's more world stuff that's supposed to be inherently interesting to readers.
But it's not.
And maybe it is to someone. But, I don't know.
Tensoon also has there's actually a 4th magic system that's talked about here, which is like the Kandra can use blessings, whatever the fuck that means, to one of them is just to like be emotionally stable, which is very funny, but it's like the blessing of stability and then a bunch of other ones nobody cares about.
So how Kandra are created is like mist wraiths, which is also not clear where those come from, which are like the big wild,
that's a good point.
which are the big wild goo monsters that are kind of mindless. They like graze on stuff like cows.
They're kind of cute.
Yeah. You put metal spikes into those and they become conscious and they become Kandra. But also you give Kandra metal spikes more different ones, and then they have different other powers. And that's kept vague because it's supposed to keep us curious, I guess, but I don't care.
Yeah, so did the Lord Ruler create mist wraiths, or did he create the ability to make mist wraiths into Kandra?
I think the second thing.
So mist wraiths have always been around because the mists are ruin, I think. Vin, I think so. I could be wrong about this, but I think the mists are a ruin, and Vin is like, God, why did they help me kill the Lord Ruler that one time? And it's like, maybe it was the big bad guy trying to help you free him. Like, have you ever thought about that? Even if that's wrong, like that, immediately I was like, that's what I would be thinking. And she's like, guess I'll never know. It's never happened again. Nobody ever questions anything important in this book. They always just question like, am I a hypocrite? Like, I don't care. I don't care about that.
They're hyper vigilant about like, is anything I'm thinking hypocritical at all? I have to be fully consistent, or else Sazed won't believe in me.
Yeah, that guy with no penis who wears glasses sometimes won't believe me. Which still gets brought up a bunch of times that Sazed has no penis in this book. By the way, they're not allowed to forget.
And he's not allowed to be happy ever.
Yeah.
Because of that. great segue to talk about Sazed.
Oh yeah, here we
the
go.
Standout character of this book, and
Purposely
by standout, I mean insufferable.
Yeah, it's terrible. We said earlier that Elend is the second most insufferable person. Or maybe we said the first. Either way, it's a dead tie for me between Elend and
Sazed is the
Sazed
first.
is the first.
Elend
Yeah, Sazed is the first one.
Yeah. Elend is at least consistent in the insufferable thing that he's latched onto.
Sometimes Sazed is like happy for a page inexplicably because Brandon Sanderson has forgotten that he's supposed to be boring and bad and insufferable now.
Or that like Sazed is depressed, but he can't be so depressed that he can't function in his role in this army.
Yeah.
So he has to keep like being in charge of his little arm of this empire.
So Sazed is the character who's obsessed with religions, and after he hugged a girl who died, has completely lost all sense of personhood and self.
On the page, at the end of the last book, he had fallen in love with someone from his own race of people, Tindwyl. She died in a battle, and he got sad about it. And then when he got sad, he decided that everything he's ever believed in is not true, and he will never believe in anything ever again. And that's where we left him in the last book. And in this book, well, in the first book, he used to collect different religions and like hand them out to people to be like solace or comforting during difficult times. And in this book, he is possibly the most inconsistent stand-in for like an atheist that has ever occurred. Because he starts out as a teenage atheist who like watched a couple YouTube videos. Yeah. And he's like, I'm going through all my religions, and as soon as I find a contradiction, that means it's not true. As soon as I think it's hypocritical or it's contradictory, that means it's not true, and I'm going to throw it in the trash, and that means it's wrong. And he's going through all his religions that way. And then the whole progress in the first half of the book, he's like, I'm running out of religions, and I still haven't found one that comforts me or provides some element of truth. And so I tried to make it as consistent as I possibly could. That is more consistent than he comes off. Because already the fact that finding a religion that doesn't contradict itself and finding truth in a religion are two different things.
Yes. Yeah.
But he's also he's talking about, does God exist? That's a completely different thing. He's talking about, if God exists, why was the Lord Ruler allowed to kill people? That's also a completely different thing.
Yeah, he thinks it's all one question.
So obviously part of a concern that's happening in our world that would never occur to anyone in the world that he's in.
Right. Because it's bizarre. It doesn't make any sense that okay, so I have a question. I don't remember. The religions that Sazed knows are all pre-ascension of Rashik.
Pre-Lord Ruler, yes.
So it doesn't make any sense to question if there is a god purely because the Lord Ruler like was around, because what happened. Like he like made a mistake and drank from this thing. He was fucking there when Vin did it. Like he knows what happened.
If you grew up your whole life and the Lord Ruler was the god, and then the god died, you'd be like, there's no god anymore.
Right. I would assume so. Not that there's still a god.
There's still some god somewhere. Like what? But and then none of the religions he mentions like have a god. Like
no, they
the
don't.
religions
it's all like
are
we
all
hang out and drink wine.
Cultural practice. Like we just like art and we find feel
none of them are religion. None of them are religions. It's all just like societies.
Like a thing that you do. Like, and then on top of this all, it's like he's like, is God real? And then like, oh, what happened to Tindwyl's spirit after she died? Like, never once has an afterlife ever come up in any of these books. And as far as we know, the Lord Ruler had no conception of an afterlife. So why would any of these characters who grew up in this world ever have any reason to believe in an afterlife. Like, that's such a planet Earth Christian American thing to think about. And like every single thing that Sazed mentions is such a not World of Mistborn. I'm a 32-year-old Mormon in Utah who's learning more about the world.
So yeah, Sazed is asking questions that nobody in this world would ever ask, or at least we've never been inclined to know that they would ever ask, because, and it's just so bizarre to me, his whole obsession with religions, because in the lore of Mistborn, it appears that like there were all these religions. From the outside perspective, there were all these religions, and then suddenly there was one, because there was an actual god. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, oh no, oh shit, I guess everything was wrong, and this is an actual god. Then that god dies.
And the god who systematically wiped out any mention of these religions.
Yeah, which would, I feel like, also lead one to believe that, like, oh, this must be the religion.
Well, that's another thing that Sazed says is like, oh, none of these religions have lasted, therefore how can any of them be true? Like, that's all. Like,
right, yeah.
Just because something doesn't last doesn't mean it's not true. Like, that's,
they were systematically destroyed by an evil man. Like
that doesn't make them not true. Like, I don't like.
But then you find out like a scientific reason that whether the science is magic. I suppose they don't know like where the Well of Ascension comes from, even though we the reader know its preservation, or who cares. But they know like scientifically that he wasn't a god. He had magical abilities for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then developed this society. So you're like, okay, so that wasn't a god. Oh, so then all religions still must be fucking bullshit made up. And it's, like, what? No. What the other ones might be true. Just this one wasn't.
Nothing he says or thinks has anything to do with each other. And I think it betrays how Brandon Sanderson thinks of people who aren't religious or don't believe. Like,
yeah.
What everything he puts in that basket. Like, first of all, in order to be the atheist, you have to be depressed.
Yeah.
That's like step one. Like, someone has to die and you have to get depressed, and then you become an atheist. And the only reason you're an atheist is because you're depressed. Two is like the fact that there is a god means that a religion is true, also means that there's an afterlife. Like, those are all separate things unless you're already coming from a preconceived belief of all those things come together. Says that also at some point, he's like, all my friends have always been determined atheists throughout their whole lives or whatever. Like, no,
they're not.
There are no atheists in this world, because there was one god for 1,000 years and then he died. Like,
they're not atheists.
They're not atheists. There's not a word for
they
that.
Didn't like, not liking the god that they know exists is not atheism.
Yeah, and then like not believing in anything after they killed him, like that's not like atheism. Like I mean, I guess it is, because like, oh, there was a god and we killed him, so he's gone. But like, they're not.
But they never talk about it. They're not devout atheists. It's never important. Like, religion is not important to any of them except for Sazed.
Well, because they are trying to save the world because the crops won't grow next year. They're not all like, is the Lord Ruler's existence disprove the existence of a god because he was doing evil and God did nothing to stop it? Like, that's so like Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Like the Grand Inquisitor. Like, idea, but like, we're in Mistborn. Like, everything you've written about this world, it comes up again with a fucking like green plants are crazy. Like,
oh my god, it happens again in this book.
And like, here's a picture of a flower. It's like, pink plants. Isn't that a strange thought? It happens again in this book. And so it does all this work to be like, this isn't our world. But then it has all this stuff that's like, is our world. It's crazy.
I'm gonna...
And it's trying to be, and he wants to be escapist, but it's so not.
Another thing that is in this book, again, is the worst. It's the we fool the unfoolable and trick the untrickable, or whatever. Here it is. He says it again in this book. We're thieves. This is the guy. People worship this guy and think he's a good writer. This is a direct quote. We're thieves, gentlemen, and we're extraordinarily good ones. We can rob the unrobbable and fool the unfoolable. We know how to take an incredibly large task and break it down to manageable pieces, then deal with each of those pieces. We know how to get what we want. These things make us perfect for this particular task.
Is that this book, or is that the first book?
No, Kelsier says it in the first one, and then Breeze or whoever's like, remember when Kelsier said this, and it says it again, and it's like, that's nothing. That's nothing. It's like a motivational speech. I mean, Jesus Christ, man.
It's just all. It's all pretty embarrassing.
It is all very embarrassing. I felt embarrassed. I had to go buy this book and couldn't make. I put it on the counter and couldn't really make eye contact with the person.
I sort of don't have any more to say about Sazed other than it's, we can talk about it more in the next episode, which you found out already because the audiobook reader spoiled it for you. Sazed is the hero of ages. So how that happens and what the conclusions are, I think we'll talk about in the next one. I don't care. I was like, I don't want this to just be a total dunk fest, but I don't care at this point. I think someone needs to dunk on these books.
Yeah, these books are fucking awful.
I think they're for teenagers.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, if I have a buddy of mine is playing he has this friend who has this 12-year-old brother, mm-hmm. and that brother really wanted to play D&D for the first time and organize D&D, and so there's a few of them. They're ranging from 20 to 25, and then there's this 12-year-old, mm-hmm. and they're all playing for him and having a good time. And this book is not. He would I kept trying to think of him reading this book, and I'm like, if I'm 12 and into fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, and reading Mistborn, do I get anything out of it more? And that's an impossible question for me to answer, but if I have a young kid, there's no way I'm you should read Mistborn. Mm-hmm. Fuck no. There are so many other good fantasy books for younger people out there than this, man.
Yeah, or with the implications of stories, hey, maybe let's find a story where you're not constantly treating the only disabled character like an asshole,
and there's not a character who is named a racial slur.
It's not Mormon apologetics.
Yeah.
This is all Mormon Christian apologetics.
And whose power structures do not keep coming back around to, no, there needs to be one figurehead or else none of this is good.
Daddy has to be in charge. Just like Daddy God has to be in charge. I read
oh my God.
I think these books are probably for who Brandon Sanderson was when he wrote them.
Yeah.
A young person, maybe in their mid-20s, trying to reconcile the realities of the real world outside of their insular religion, but still wanting to stay in their insular religion.
Yeah, because the answers that we're coming to are no, God is good and he's going to save us.
And he's real and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's questioning it, but really knowing in the back of your head at all times the answer.
Yeah, it's questioning it, but while you're nodding along.
Yeah. It's for fake deep people, man. It's for Ham. Ham would love Mistborn.
I read there was a Reddit comment that was these books. It was low rated, but it was these books are about teen angst, and that's sort of how it feels like. Oh, the world's not fair. People aren't perfect. Bad things still happen. Meh.
Yeah. They're not for me. And they're also not good. I feel confident saying both of those things are true.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy something I don't care if you like them, but just know that this is not a high mark because you like Mistborn
and I will say this as someone who, the first time I read them, I liked it.
Yeah.
And now I hate them.
Yeah.
And seeing the word Mistborn fills me with dread and like ruins my day. So I don't know.
Just read something else.
There's just so much better stuff out there
by people who aren't white male Christians. Like there's a wide range.
There's better
of
stuff
books.
By white male Christians.
Oh, certainly. I'm just saying, like, if you're like reading, do not think if you are turned off by this book, do not think you don't like fantasy.
Also,
like,
do not. I also want to say, like, the fact that this is like basically Christian Mormon apologetics is not what makes it bad. Because like C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia is blatantly about Jesus Christ is good and we need to believe in him and he saves everyone. And like those are good, you know?
Jesus Christ and Santa team up in that book and it's sweet.
and Jesus Christ is a lion. Like, you know, like
that's awesome.
Like it makes me want to be a Christian, you know? Like
it worked. This book does not make me want to be Mormon.
No.
And also they're just like, we don't talk about this a lot, but like syntax and verbiage, they're also poorly written.
Yeah, well, and this is my list of like I just have a list of like weird inconsistencies that might be fun to go through, like in terms of prose and stuff. And the defense is like, oh, you know, hey, the prose might not be good, the characters might not be good, but like the world building is good. But then like I think what these books have cemented in me is like the way you write the book is how the book is. Like if a different author did the exact same plot in the same world, it would be better.
Yeah, because it's how you're interacting with the media. It's like it's like if you watched a movie, but you had to like wear or you had to like wear earmuffs and watch it through like weird little like drunk goggles. You'd be like, I didn't like that. You're like, well, it's actually really good.
Actually, Martin Scorsese wrote the script. Like, but like I didn't see half of it, and like I don't. I couldn't really hear it.
Yeah.
Earlier in the book, the text said, "This was more easily contemplated than completed." And I'm like, just say easier said than done, or don't say anything at all.
Yes, here we go.
Vin rips the cloak off a dead Inquisitor, and Ellen like shields his eyes and says, "Have respect for the dead, Vin," because like it's bad that he sees him naked.
Yeah,
but, like they're like the evil robot men. Like I don't. Very strange. Doesn't come up again. Breeze is racist against the Ska when he's like, I've seen the kind of governments the Ska set up, and let me tell you, they won't last long.
Yep. And it is racism because they're literally like genetically different than
and it says they're genetically different, but by the time of this book happens, they're all basically, it all equals out. But like,
because of the justification is like in the world, like, no, there was enough race mixing that now racism is gone. And it's like, no, you can't get away. You wrote it and made it like that in the fucking first place.
You know, whenever we read Stormlight Archive, I think, and we can bring this back, like, I think there's a lot to be said about the way Brandon Sanderson writes fantasy races and how the Mormon church treats different races in our real world. I think there's a lot of interesting parallels there. Not that like Brandon Sanderson is a racist, but like I think him being steeped in the way the Mormon church thinks about things, like whether he's playing into it or like playing opposite of it, like I think it's influenced quite a bit. Which is troubling, even if like it's troubling. Even if it's like more, even if like he's morally correct, like it's just weird, so weird that you would.
Yeah, it's weird that you would. That's a good way to say it.
It's like if I wrote a fantasy book, but I did, you know, like the whole like Noah's Ark and Noah's 3 sons, and like one of them was white, one of them was like brown, and one was black.
Yes.
Like if that was the basis of my fantasy world, like that rate, like even if I'm like, oh, they're all the same at the end, like why did he feel
why'd
like,
you say it in the first place?
Why was your jumping off point a racist legend in the real world?
Yeah.
One of the epigraphs said, just talking about the ash, and it said, you know, they moved it around and tried to get rid of it, but generally they just let it be. That's they didn't let it be because they tried to move it around and try to get rid of it.
Got rid of it.
There's a great moment where Spook is trying to fight with a sword, and like there's another Allomancer in the fight scene, and the Allomancer stops the sword, and then the text says, just like the way Kelsier interfered in the battle in the caves in the first book, Spook wasn't there. I went back to check in the book. Spook wasn't in the caves. So that was like a weird, like a narrator trying to be like, hey, remember this random moment is just like a moment from the first book. So it wasn't Spook thinking it, or if it was, it's wrong. Spook wasn't there.
It made it sound like, it sounds like Spook is thinking it in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Vin stretches the word, or Brandon Sanderson stretches the meaning of the word betrayal to try to fit his theme, where Vin talks about she traveled to the Well of Ascension and was betrayed by what was there. And it's like, it's the evil force. Like, it lied to you and tricked you. Like, you weren't betrayed. Like,
you didn't know it.
You didn't, yeah. Like, you were tricked to and lied to.
Oh, there's also a realization that the mist spirit was preservation, and the reason it stabbed Ellen was because it was like, oh no, Vin will use the power to save Ellen and won't release it.
Or just still releases it.
You could have found another way to communicate that. I really feel like, because especially if you've been following them all along, this mist spirit would have probably known that like they are characters who are reaching emotional growth, and I would not have relied on the fact that they're selfish bastards to save the universe or whatever.
On my previous point, I had the note that like it's like saying Frodo was betrayed by Sauron. Like,
yeah, or specifically what was betrayed by the One Ring.
Yeah,
because it's like no, you used it.
No, that's what it
you
does.
Used it and you knew
that's
it was
just what it does.
Yeah, that's so. Oh my god! See, this is the kind of stuff that makes me mad in my head that I just let kind of wash over me in hatred.
The whole book is just stacks of these little things. It's just a stack of these tiny little weird things. Oh yeah, I'll go through them pretty fast. There's a reveal that in order to get Allomancers, like that people need to go through a like really traumatic event, and so this is the only book it comes up with where nobles would like beat all of their children to near death to try to get some of them to snap. You'd think that would have more, and Ellen says that happened to him. Think that would have come up, or would have cultural implications on a whole society that beats all of their children to within an inch of their life, and that's just a rite of passage. But it doesn't. It's one paragraph.
And also in Ellen's government, he's like, we're still doing it, just now it's voluntary.
They call the mists that come into the day mists. We can just call them mists.
Yep.
Urto, which is the city the city had a bunch of like canals that were eventually drained. And the canals are now used, the empty canals are used as streets. They call them street slots. They could just, I don't know, you just say they're empty canals. Like, I don't know if they need a weird slang word.
Yeah.
They're just either the streets or the canals.
The slang of the Mistborn is really cringy. Tin eye and coin shot. I hate that shit.
It's like two normal words.
Yeah. Straight slots. Ugh. Bullshit.
Vin says her full name at one point, which is Vin Venture.
Vin Venture. I was really, I was excited. I was like, oh shit, they're going to be like, she's like Vincenza or whatever. Or like, no, her name is just Vin.
And she didn't have a last name, but now that she's married to a man, it's Venture.
Yep.
One of my big fantasy pet peeves is when they describe any clothes, and Brandon Sanderson does a lot, cut after a modern fashion. That does no work to make me imagine anything, because I don't know what the modern fashion is. Because I'm not in this world. Like, just leave it out. Like, that doesn't make me imagine anything. That's all I got.
Those are pretty good.
Let's move on to concluding thoughts. This book, the first half of this book, for being supposedly the climax of this trilogy, feels like the phrase that kept coming to my head is the idiom rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah. Yep.
where the world is clearly ending. Everyone seems to believe it, but they're all like not doing anything you would do to actually do something about it, even though they can.
Which, you know, if you were a talented writer, could be an interesting story.
Mm-hmm. With maybe some dramatic irony thrown in there, but everything has to be saved for a twist later on, so nothing can happen early in the book.
Because, like, they could be trying to, like, live out their normal lives when the world is ending. Like, that could be an interesting story. But no, they're just idiots.
And everyone's basically a teenager. Like, I think the whole book is like, everyone is a teenager whose dad is out of town. And they have to, like... It's like all like they're all home alone on this planet that's like falling apart, and like the house is burning.
And everybody killed their mean dad, and now mean grandpa is coming to town to fuck you up.
And they're all like, "We're gonna eat Cheetos," and it would be interesting if it was on purpose, but it's not.
It's not. No, it's not.
And that's all I have to say about this.
This book is the ultimate exercise in just what are we doing here? For me, there's nothing, because there's no like allegory that's being made. The one that is clumsily trying to be made that we think that we're talking about, this like religious, is just so childlike that it's like. It's nothing. It's
and
nothing because
and inconsistent. It's like it's just clear the author doesn't understand the ideas he is trying to communicate.
Yeah, he's not smart enough to get it, to wrap his head around it. Or like that's not even it. You don't have to be smart. You just have to have an interesting opinion, and it's not interesting.
Or an understanding of it that's consistent
at all.
Yeah,
yeah.
Or not coming in with your mind pre-made up. Like, that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
like,
and unwilling to budge.
Yeah, like, oh, I know my point is going to be that religion is good and we need Sky Daddy to take care of us. So I'm going to write sort of a half-assed book about not having that, not going well, so I can prove the point I believe.
But I don't, this is a really fascinating experience for me, because I know some people are this way, where they're like, I don't like this book, but I started it and I'm going to finish it. I'm not that way. If I don't like it, I'm dropping it. I have never done something like this before, which is push through something I don't like. And it's really shown that like I've been correct in the way I've been living my life, which is, no, you should drop it because you're not going to get anything from it. And you know, those other books might be good. Because I don't tend to just like see a book. I'm not the kind of person that goes to like a local bookstore or whatever and it's just like, oh, this looks good, and I buy it. Like I try to research it beforehand. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing. I'm just so fed up with it, and I'm not excited for it. I'm not excited to see what happens. I'm excited for it to be over.
In retrospect, I don't know what I was thinking when I finished these books. I think I wasn't, and that's how I finished them. Like, I literally just let them wash over me before I went to bed. And then that was fine. And I never thought about it again.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the only way to get through these.
You and millions of people around the world.
Or people who... I don't know who has read these.
Yeah, I've never met somebody personally who's read them. I at least read all of them.
Right.
I've met people who've read one or two, but never all three.
And we said this is an earlier episode. Like, the first book, if that's not doing it for you, you're going to drop it and never think about these books again. If it's really doing it for you, you might muscle your way all the way through. But there's I don't think there's anyone in our boat who did not like them and then kept reading them.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But this is just for, hopefully, we are lone voice in the wilderness crying out, you're not missing anything at all.
And if you do like Mistborn or Brandon and you're listening to this, thanks. I appreciate it.
I think Brandon Sanderson has better stuff.
Yes, and you're also doing much more intellectual legwork than Brandon Sanderson by listening to a dissenting opinion at all. So,
all right, next time we're gonna finish these books and never look back.
Yeah, next time we find out what happens to Spook, what happens to Sazed, and I doubt any of it will be good. It might be interesting. It might be interesting on paper, but in practice, like much of this, it will be ill-advised.
If your audience has read 1,400 pages and you still haven't won them over, it's too late.
All
right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, I guess. Bye, everyone. We promise it's almost over.